The kitchen doors of Caruso's Italian restaurant burst open at 11:47 in the evening. Vivien Morales stumbles through them like a wounded animal, her body moving on instinct alone, rain streaming down her face, blood mixing with water and dripping onto the polished white tile floor. She is 26 years old, but the exhaustion carved into her face makes her look 35, 40 even. Dark hair plastered to her pale skin, her delivery uniform torn at the shoulder, soaked completely through, clinging to her thin frame. A gash above her right eye bleeds steadily, a line of crimson running down her cheekbone, her trembling hand unable to keep up with the flow. She collapses to her knees. Hard. The impact reverberates through her body, a fresh wave of pain shooting up her legs, but she does not cry out. She has learned not to cry out. Her bloody handprints bloom across the white tile like flowers that no one wants to see. The kitchen staff freezes. A sous chef with a ladle in hand, a dishwasher at the sink, a line cook mid-flip. All of them stare, motionless, because this is not the kind of thing that happens in Caruso's. Not here. Not in this place. But the kitchen is not where this story matters. In the private booth at the back of the restaurant, behind the velvet rope that separates the ordinary world from everything else, Giovanni Caruso sits alone. 47 years old, built like a man carved from stone, expensive grey suit tailored to perfection, white silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar revealing the hard line of his chest. Dark hair swept back from his face, sharp cheekbones, a scar running from the outside corner of his left eye down to his jawline like a slash of violence interrupted mid-swing. Before him sits a glass of Barolo, untouched, the wine the color of old blood. 3 men in black suits stand behind him like monuments, watching the room with eyes that miss nothing. Vinny on the left, broad-shouldered, a silver ring on every finger. Enzo on the right, younger, with a scar tissue through his left eyebrow. Giovanni does not look up from his wine. Then the doors to the kitchen burst open again. Micah runs through them, 6 years old, small-boned and quick, moving with the kind of desperation that only children understand. He has been hiding in the kitchen, waiting for her, as he always does when she works the evening shift. Dark eyes wide with fear, he bypasses every adult in the restaurant and runs directly to the back booth, directly to Giovanni Caruso, a man he has never met before, and grabs his hand with both of his small fists. "Please," the boy says, his voice trembling like a candle in wind. "Please help her. She is the nice lady who reads to me. She reads the stories about the girl with the red shoes. She sits with me when I am scared. Please help her. She is hurt. Please." Giovanni Caruso's dark eyes, eyes that have seen 23 years of blood and betrayal and the slow corruption of everything they touched, land on the bleeding woman collapsed on his floor. In that moment, something fractures. It is not visible. There is no sound. His face does not change. But inside him, something that has been frozen for 15 years begins to break, and the pieces fall like ice under spring sun. Because this desperate girl with blood on her face is looking at his lost daughter's child with a tenderness he thought he would never feel again in this world. The kind of tenderness that he cannot explain, that he cannot name, that terrifies him more than any rival ever has. Vinny and Enzo exchange a look. In 15 years of working for Giovanni Caruso, they have never seen him acknowledge a stranger. They have never seen him react to anything. But now he is rising from his seat, and his movements are deliberate, controlled, each muscle engaged like a man moving underwater. He walks toward her. The entire restaurant goes silent. Not the quiet of normal silence, but the silence of a room holding its breath, the kind of silence that has weight and pressure. Giovanni kneels beside Vivien Morales. His expensive suit jacket creases. He does not appear to care. With one hand, steady and careful, he tilts her chin up so he can see her face. His thumb brushes the blood away from her eye, a gesture so gentle that it seems impossible it could come from a man built like war. "Who did this to you?" he says, and his voice is deep and solid like an oath, like the foundation of something that will never break. Vivien looks at him through the haze of pain and terror, and she sees a stranger, sees a man in an expensive suit kneeling in the rain-soaked tile of a restaurant kitchen, and she does not have the strength to be afraid of him because she is already afraid of everything. "I cannot," she whispers. I cannot tell you. If I tell you, it will only get worse. But what no one in that restaurant understood was that Giovanni Caruso had made a decision in the space between heartbeats, and that decision would change the trajectory of both their lives. He had spent 15 years building an empire as a shield against the world, and he had spent 15 years alone in that empire, untouched, unreachable, watching his grief grow like a tumor in his chest. He did not know this girl. He did not know her name or her story or why she was bleeding on his floor. But he would. Before anyone could move, before Vinny could step forward with questions, before Enzo could clear the restaurant, the sound of sirens cut through the humid August night outside, growing closer, growing louder, the kind of sirens that arrive too late for anything except paperwork and regret. Giovanni's jaw tightened. He turned back to Vivien, and his eyes held something new. Something dangerous. Something that looked almost like protection. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 3 months earlier, when Vivien Morales had everything. Or at least, she had more than $78 in her pocket. She had an apartment. She had a future that looked like it might, someday, become something more than survival. It was May, and the sun was still trying to believe the world was beautiful. Vivien woke at 5 in the morning in the apartment she shared with her roommate Keisha in northeast Philadelphia. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, rent $1,200 a month split between them, which meant her portion was $600, which meant she had approximately 4 hours of work per shift to cover it. The mattress underneath her was thin, the kind that remembers every night it has ever been slept on, and the ceiling had a water stain shaped vaguely like a bird that seemed to get larger every time it rained. But the apartment was hers. Technically hers. Her name was on the lease. She lay in bed for exactly 47 seconds, allowing herself this small luxury of stillness, then she rose. She could not afford to be tired. Being tired was a luxury for people with savings. She pulled on her work clothes, a black shirt and black pants, her name embroidered on the pocket in fading white thread, Vivien. The kitchen smelled like old coffee and the ghosts of meals already eaten. There was nothing in the refrigerator except a container of yogurt and something green that had stopped being identifiable 3 days ago. She made her coffee black, no sugar, because sugar cost money and milk cost more, and she counted the bills in her wallet while the coffee brewed. $123. This number would have to last 7 days. By the end of those 7 days, it would need to cover groceries, gas for her scooter, the payment on her medical school debt of $47,000 that she would be paying back for the next 20 years, and the deposit that her landlord had mentioned something about needing to discuss. But that discussion did not happen this morning. This morning, Vivien finished her coffee, secured her delivery scooter in the hallway, and drove to her first shift at a downtown cafe, arriving at 6:45 in the morning, 13 minutes before opening. She was never late. She had never been late in her entire life because lateness was a choice, and choice was a luxury she could not afford. The cafe owner was a man named Derek who had never learned her name, calling her delivery girl, or sometimes just you, and he did not care that she arrived early, did not acknowledge it, did not tip her extra. She carried boxes of pastries from the loading dock, arranged them in the window, wiped down tables that no one had sat at, and waited for the first customers to arrive so she could begin the transaction of trading her labor for $7.50 per hour. By 9 o'clock, when the morning rush was reaching its peak, Vivien had served 42 people. She could count them. She counted everything. 42 transactions, 42 times she said good morning or what can I get for you, 42 moments when she tried to make her smile genuine, when she tried to make her voice warm, when she tried to make herself into the kind of person that people felt comfortable ordering from. At 10 minutes before her shift ended at 2 in the afternoon, a man came in and ordered a large cappuccino and a croissant. He was well-dressed, expensive watch, expensive shoes, the kind of man who moves through the world expecting it to open up for him. When Vivien brought his order, he looked at her, actually looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "You look exhausted," he said. Not unkindly. Just as a statement of fact. "I am okay," Vivien said, because she was always okay, because admitting anything else was not an option. "How much do they pay you here?" he asked. "Enough," she said, which was not the truth, but the truth was dangerous. He never came back. By 5 in the afternoon, Vivien had changed into her delivery uniform and was driving her scooter to the restaurant district, the lunch shift at the cafe bleeding directly into the evening shift at multiple restaurants where she carried food from kitchen to table, where she fetched water and cleared plates and tried to be invisible in the way that service workers learn to become invisible. The sun was setting by 8 o'clock, the August heat lingering even as the daylight faded, making everything feel sticky and slow and endless. At that moment, in an office building 2 miles away, a man named Harold Brennan was reviewing documents. He was 54 years old, with the kind of face that had been hardened by greed into something that barely looked human anymore. He had been Vivien's landlord 3 months ago, before the fire, before everything changed, before the entire trajectory of her life altered itself into a shape she could not recognize. The fire had happened in March. She had been sleeping. It had started in the apartment below hers, an electrical fire in the walls, moving upward with the kind of hunger that fire has, consuming everything it touched. She had woken to the smell of smoke, to sirens, to the sound of water destroying what remained of her possessions. The red duffel bag that held her mother's photograph, her birth certificate, her medical school application materials. Most of it was destroyed. Harold Brennan had insured the building. The landlord had not insured the tenant's possessions. When she requested compensation for the $47,000 in medical school tuition that she had been saving, for the laptop that had burned, for the books and notes and supplies that she would need to continue her education, he had laughed. Actually laughed. A sound like gravel in an engine. "You got renter's insurance?" he had asked. She had not. Renter's insurance cost money. Money she did not have. "Not my problem then," he had said, and he had returned to his desk and forgotten about her immediately. But 3 months later, on this humid August evening, Harold Brennan was reviewing a document that had appeared in his mailbox. It was a list of debts. A ledger. A detailed accounting of repairs he claimed she owed him for the damage caused by her unit, for the professional cleanup required, for the contractor fees, for the lost rent on the unit below her during repairs, for the management of the insurance claim, for his time, for his inconvenience. The total was $150,000. It was typed on official letterhead. It looked like it was legal. It looked like it meant something. He had given her 7 days to pay it, or he was filing a lawsuit against her. Vivien did not know about the letter yet. The letter was at her apartment, sitting on her kitchen counter, waiting for her to come home and discover it. She would discover it in approximately 3 hours. Her hands would shake when she read it. She would read it 4 times, her brain refusing to accept the numbers, her eyes going over the words again and again as if repetition could change their meaning. But for now, at 8 o'clock in the evening, she was alive in the world as she had been, unburdened by this knowledge, still moving through her shift at a restaurant called Lucia's, carrying plates of pasta and clearing empties, counting tips, calculating whether the $5 she had earned in gratuities so far would be enough to cover tomorrow's gas. The door to the restaurant opened, letting in a gust of humid air and the smell of the street, and a man entered whom Vivien did not see, did not know, did not understand would become the reason her world came apart. His name was not important yet. What was important was that he was looking for someone, and he was not the kind of man who left a restaurant until he found what he was searching for. What was important was that somewhere in the city, in a mansion on the main line, Giovanni Caruso was sitting alone in a room that had not been entered in 15 years, a room with toys still on the shelves, a small bed with a pink quilt, a mobile spinning slowly above the crib, waiting for a daughter who had died the day she was born. He did not know that in 3 months, a desperate girl with blood on her face would walk into his world and teach him what it meant to survive something. He did not know that his entire empire, built on cruelty and protection, was about to be rebuilt as something else entirely. But change was coming, fast as rain, like a blade cutting through the August night. 3 months before the night everything changed, Philadelphia was drowning in May heat, and Vivien Morales was drowning in silence. Her apartment sat above Bonadetti's bakery on 9th Street, 2 cramped rooms where the smell of rising dough seeped through the floorboard starting at 4 in the morning. The bedroom held a twin bed with sheets she washed twice a week in the bathtub, a dresser with 3 drawers, and a desk pushed against the window where she studied. Nursing textbooks lay stacked like a monument to a future that still felt possible then, their spines cracked from use, their margins filled with her handwriting in blue pen. On the desk sat a photograph in a frame without glass, the frame itself chipped at one corner. Her parents, younger than she was now, stood with their arms around each other in front of a house she had never lived in, smiling at a camera in 1991. That photograph was the only thing in the room that mattered. It was 2 in the morning on May 15 when she looked up from her notes on cardiac pathology, her eyes burning from fatigue. She had worked the dinner shift at Mario's Pizzeria, been stiffed on tips by a table of 4, earned just $14 in gratuities, and needed to be back there at 11. The fluorescent light above her desk hummed. Outside, the city slept. Inside, Vivien did not sleep, could not afford to sleep, because sleep was time and time was money and money was the one currency she did not possess enough of. She was 24 years old and had learned early that the world sorted people into categories, and she belonged to the category of people who did not get to rest. The fire began at 4:17 in the morning. It did not start in her apartment. It started in the bakery below, in the ovens that were being prepared for the day's first batch of bread, though no one would ever say exactly how. What started as orange light became red light became black smoke that climbed the walls like something alive, like something hungry. The smell came first, not the smell of bread anymore, but the smell of burning wood and melting plastic and something else, something chemical and wrong. Vivien woke to the sound of her smoke detector screaming. She did not think. She moved. The hallway was already hazed with smoke, thick enough that she could not see the floor. She crawled, her hands burning on carpet that was too hot, her lungs screaming for air that was not there. Behind her, the bedroom was becoming an inferno. The photograph. She had made it to the apartment door before her mind screamed at her to go back, but her legs would not obey. Fire was everywhere now, a live thing with teeth, and she pushed through the stairwell door and descended into darkness, guided only by the emergency lighting that cut the smoke into geometric shapes. The street was chaos when she stumbled out. Fire trucks were already arriving, their sirens cutting through the night like blades through silk. Firefighters in turnout gear moved with the precision of soldiers, and Vivien stood in the street in her cotton pajamas, her bare feet on the hot asphalt, watching flames consume the only home she had ever owned, watching her entire life become ash and ember and smoke. Her skin smelled like burnt hair. Her lungs felt charred. A firefighter wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and guided her to an ambulance, where a paramedic examined the burns on her hands and asked her name and asked her if anyone was still inside. She said no. She said no one was still inside. The next morning, in borrowed clothes that did not fit, standing in front of the smoking ruins of Bernadetti's bakery and the 3 apartments above it, Vivien held one thing. One photograph. The frame had not survived, but the photograph had. Its edges were singed brown, her parents' faces still visible through the damage, still smiling at a camera from a future they would never see. An insurance investigator named Coleman came to see her on May 18 at the temporary shelter where she had been placed by social services. He was a thin man with tired eyes and a clipboard. He explained to her that the fire had originated in the commercial kitchen, likely in a faulty electrical connection in the bakery's main oven. He said this in a flat voice while writing notes. He said it was not her fault. He said the building owner, a man named Brennan, would not be able to hold her financially responsible. She had nodded, the blanket of relief settling across her shoulders like the paramedic's blanket had settled the night of the fire. That relief lasted 4 days. Brennan came to see her on May 22. He was a large man, soft in the middle, with the kind of face that smiled without reaching his eyes. He sat across from her in the shelter's common room, on a plastic chair that creaked under his weight, and he placed a piece of paper on the table between them. The paper was handwritten, the handwriting cramped and angry-looking. At the top, it said, "Outstanding debts, Vivien Morales. Bakery reconstruction, $95,000. Building damage restoration, $40,000. Lost business revenue, $15,000. Interest on delayed settlement, $3,000. Total, $153,000. The inspector was wrong, Brennan said, his voice like gravel in a concrete mixer. The fire didn't start with faulty wiring. It started in your apartment. You left a candle burning. That candle fell. That candle killed my business. I did not leave a candle burning, Vivien said. Her voice was small, barely a whisper. I have not burned candles in 3 years. They cost too much. Then you left something else burning. A cigarette. A stove. Something. He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who knew he did not need to be truthful. It doesn't matter what you left burning. It matters what you are going to pay me. $150,000, Miss Morales, or I press charges for arson and negligence. Your choice. She had looked at the paper. She had looked at the numbers. She had looked at Harold Brennan's face. The shelter gave her 3 weeks to find housing. By the 3rd week, her options had narrowed to a room above a laundromat on Kensington Avenue, rent $600 a month, which she could not afford. She rented it anyway because the alternative was sleeping in the shelter's basement with 40 other women, and at least the room had a door that locked. On June 10th, she started working at Mario's Pizzeria as a delivery driver. The job paid $9 an hour plus tips. Most days, the tips were nothing. Some days, the tips were $3 or $4. Once, a man gave her a $5 bill for a $40 order, and she had cried in the bathroom afterward because the mathematics of poverty were beginning to break her mind. Her beat-up Vespa scooter was 1987 model, purchased for $300 from a woman whose son had crashed it into a fence. The brakes worked when they felt like working. The engine leaked oil onto her uniform. The seat tore open on the left side, and she had taped it with silver duct tape that was now filthy and peeling. $78. That was what she had left in her checking account on June 15th, exactly 1 month after the fire. $78 to cover food, the laundromat rent due in 2 weeks, and the growing debts accumulating like snow on a grave. But Vivien had learned something in the 6 weeks since the fire. She was still alive. Her lungs still worked. Her hand still healed. She could not afford candles, but she could afford to hope, and hope was the only economy in which she was still solvent. The shelter where she volunteered was called St. Michael's House, a converted brownstone on 8th and Lombard where children in the system waited for families that would never come. She went there Tuesday nights after her shift, still in her grease-stained uniform, still smelling like delivery scooter and failure. She brought books she found at dollar stores and free libraries, books with broken spines and missing pages, and she sat in the common room and read to children whose eyes were older than their faces. It was June 20th when she met Micah. He was 6 years old, though he looked smaller, as if the world had refused to let him grow at full size. His hair was too long, falling into his eyes. His skin was darker than hers, his eyes were the color of good coffee, and when he looked at her, she felt something in her chest move the way it had not moved since the fire. He was sitting alone in the corner of the common room, drawing with a crayon that was so old it had no point, just a blunt nub of brown that barely made marks on the paper. When she sat down beside him, he did not look up. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "Colors for sad days," he said. His voice was thin, like something that had been stretched too far. "When I feel sad, I look at the sad colors and it does not feel like I am the only one." Vivien looked at the paper. It was covered in browns and grays and blacks, swirled together with no shape or pattern. It was the loneliest thing she had ever seen. "Do you like stories?" she asked. He looked up then, his old young eyes meeting hers. "Does the lady have books?" "Yes," Vivien said. She held up the 3 books she had brought. One was about a dog that learned to count. One was about a lighthouse. One was about a girl who found a key that opened a door to somewhere beautiful. Micah chose the book about the key. She read to him for an hour. He sat beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she could smell the institutional shampoo in his hair. When she finished, he was asleep against her shoulder, his small body finally still, his breathing finally even. A staff member named Teresa came to wake him for dinner. As Micah stood up, groggy and confused, he looked back at her and said, "Will the nice lady come back?" "Yes," Vivien said. "Every Tuesday." She kept that promise for 6 weeks. Every Tuesday, she came from her shift and found Micah waiting in the corner of the common room, sometimes with a new drawing, sometimes without. She read to him. She helped him sound out words. She bought him a new pencil with her own money, a pencil with an eraser, a luxury he held in his hand like it was made of gold. She learned that he had nightmares about storms, that he woke screaming, that the staff would hold him in the dark until he stopped shaking. She learned that he had no family, that his case file was marked Father Unknown, that he was as alone in the world as a person could be. On July 29th, during a thunderstorm that made Micah's entire body rigid with fear, she held him and said, "I am here. I am not going anywhere. You are safe." He had looked at her with those old eyes and said, "Everyone else leaves. I do not want you to leave." She had promised him she would not leave. It was a promise she meant, a promise she intended to keep, a promise that would become impossible to keep by the time she understood what it meant. August arrived like a blade cutting through the sky. On August 10th, Vivien was boxing a delivery order at Mario's pizzeria when a man entered through the front door. She knew who he was before he spoke. It was Harold Brennan. He was holding a piece of paper. This paper was different from the first one. This paper had been revised multiple times. Numbers had been crossed out and replaced with larger numbers. At the top, it now read, "Outstanding debts, Vivien Morales, amended." The total was now $180,000. He asked the owner, Mario, if he could speak to her in the back. Mario said yes. Mario was always saying yes to men like Harold Brennan, men with a kind of face that suggested they knew where to find people. In the back alley, the smell of rotting food and grease hung so thick you could taste it. Harold Brennan held up the amended list. 7 days, he said. His voice was like something concrete breaking. "You have 7 days to pay me, or I file charges for arson, for fraud, for negligence resulting in property damage. 7 days, Miss Morales, and then you belong to the state." "I do not have that money," Vivien said. She was standing with her back against the brick wall of the restaurant, and she was shaking, but not the shaking of fear. This was the shaking of rage, ancient and certain, the shaking of someone who had been pushed so far down that pushing further would simply break her or make her unbreakable. "Then you have nothing," he said. He smiled. "You are nothing. And you have 7 days to become something, or the law will do it for you." He walked away. She stood against the wall, the amended list in her hand, reading the numbers again and again as if repetition could change what they meant. It could not. It would not. She had 7 days. She had $78. She had a promise to a 6-year-old boy that she might not be able to keep. She was standing in that alley, in that moment, when she did not yet know that the world was about to tear itself open. The 7th day arrived like a knife cutting through air. August 17th, and the humidity hung so thick you could taste the metal of it on your tongue. Vivien Morales clocked out at 10:11 p.m., her delivery shift bleeding into the next one, her legs moving like they belonged to someone else. The restaurant owner handed her $43 in tips, and she counted it 3 times before putting it in her pocket. $121 total. $121 between her and nothing. The shelter was 4 blocks from the restaurant. She told herself she would not go. She had already said goodbye to Micah in her heart, already prepared the leaving. But her feet carried her there anyway, like a body moving on autopilot, like muscle memory had its own agenda. The social worker at the desk was a woman with tired eyes and a clipboard. She looked up when Vivien entered, recognition flickering across her face like a candle in wind. "Micah," Vivien said. "I was here with him 3 days ago. I wanted to." "He's gone," the woman said. Her voice was not unkind. "His father came for him. Case closed. Permanent placement." Vivien's hands went numb. The floor tilted. She stood there for 7 seconds that felt like 7 years, then turned and walked back out into the August night without speaking. The air outside was thick enough to choke on. Thunder rumbled somewhere beyond the skyline, a sound like furniture being moved in the house of God. She walked to Caruso's restaurant. She did not plan to. Her body simply knew where to go, following the route of 1,000 deliveries, the muscle memory of survival. The kitchen lights blazed yellow at 11:15 p.m. when she entered through the back door, her uniform still damp from earlier orders, her hair coming loose from its ponytail. Steam rose from the stove. The sound of chopping filled the kitchen like a rhythm, like the heartbeat of something large and alive. 2 line cooks were talking near the prep station, their voices low and urgent. One of them said something about the booth in the back, about the boss, about Giovanni Caruso, the man whose name whispered through Philadelphia's underworld like a curse that could not be erased. She had heard the name before. Everyone in the city had heard it. She peered through the service window. The booth in the back was set apart, isolated, dimly lit by candles that cost more than her entire month's rent. And sitting there alone, one hand wrapped around a wine glass he was not drinking, was a man whose presence seemed to absorb all the light in the room. Giovanni Caruso was 6'3" tall, broad-shouldered, built like a fortress. He wore a dark suit that fit him like it had been painted onto his body, the jacket open to reveal a white shirt with the top 3 buttons undone. His hair was black, sleek, pushed back from a face carved from stone. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, ancient, the color of a storm at midnight, and hollow like a tomb that had been sealed for years. In 15 years, Giovanni Caruso had not shown warmth. This was the word on the street. Cold. Ruthless. A man who built an empire on silence and did not apologize. A man whose name meant death had already been decided. She was still watching him when the back door of the kitchen exploded open. Harold Brennan came through like a hurricane given human form. He was 38 years old, thick-necked, with hands that looked like they had been used as tools for breaking things. His face was red. His breathing came in short, violent bursts. He saw Vivien and his expression shifted into something worse than anger. It became satisfaction. He grabbed her by the collar of her uniform and dragged her backward, toward the alley. She tried to pull away. Her legs scraped against the concrete. The sound her shoes made was like an animal being dragged toward slaughter. 7 days, he said. His voice was like something concrete breaking. The clock hit midnight. Time is up. He threw her against the brick wall of the alley. The back of her head connected with the wall and the world went white. Pain bloomed like a flower opening in fast motion. Her hand went to her head and came back wet. $150,000, Harold Brennan said. He pulled out a piece of paper, handwritten, lines added and crossed out and rewritten until the original sum was almost unrecognizable. That is what you owe. And I have documentation. I have witnesses. I have everything I need to send you to prison. She tried to run. He caught her wrist. The pain was sharp, clean, like being cut. She wrenched away, feeling skin tear, and bolted toward the restaurant kitchen. The back door swung open at 11:27 p.m. She stumbled through it, blood running down the side of her face, her breath coming in fractured pieces. And that was when Micah ran to Giovanni Caruso. The boy was 6 years old, small-boned, dark-haired, with eyes the same color as the man sitting alone in the booth. He came running from the kitchen stairs like his legs could not carry him fast enough, and he wrapped his arms around Giovanni's leg, and his voice broke the silence like a stone through glass. "She is sick," Micah said. His words were stumbling, urgent. "She is hurt. The nice lady is hurt and she is scared and I need her. Please. I need Vivi." Giovanni Caruso stood slowly. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, each action separated from the next like he was thinking through mathematics. He looked down at Micah, then toward the kitchen, and that was when his eyes found Vivien collapsed on the black and white checkered floor, bleeding from a wound above her eye, her uniform torn, her body shaking like a thing that had been broken and was still learning how to exist. Something in him cracked open like the surface of ice in spring. It was almost audible. The sound of something sacred breaking. His jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck went rigid. Vinny, standing near the service station, watched his boss's face change. In 15 years, he had never seen him move toward anyone in protection. In 15 years, Giovanni Caruso had killed without hesitation and forgotten without pause. But now he was moving, and Vinny knew that the world had tilted on its axis. Giovanni knelt beside Vivien. His suit, worth more than her annual salary, pressed against the contaminated floor without hesitation. His hand reached out and touched her face, careful, like she was made of something that would shatter if he pressed too hard. "Who did this to you?" he said. Not a question. A statement. A promise. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. She looked up at him, vision blurring, and she saw Micah safe in the background, and she whispered, "I am sorry, I just needed to see that he was okay." Then the world went black. The rain began at midnight, heavy and relentless, the kind of rain that comes from a sky that has finally given up holding back the weight of the world. Outside, Brennan stood in the alley, soaked through, waiting for her to emerge. But she never would. She was upstairs now, in a bedroom she had never seen, in a mansion that existed in a different world entirely, and she was about to discover that the boy she loved had a father who did not forgive. Vivien woke at 1:23 in the morning. The bed beneath her was silk, real silk, the kind that cost as much as her rent for 3 months. The room was dark except for a single light on the nightstand, and she could smell expensive cologne, the kind that smelled like money and winter. A man was there, older, gray-haired, wearing a long coat. "Concussion," he said. He was closing his medical bag, moving with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. "Stitches. She needs rest. No exertion. Monitor her vision." He walked to the door, then paused. "Your boss paid in cash. No record of this ever happened. She was never here." The door closed. Vivien sat up too fast and the room tilted. She tried to stand and her legs would not obey. The panic came like water flooding into a basement, rising, rising, rising. "Where is Micah?" she said aloud. Her voice was barely audible, trembling like a candle in wind. The bedroom door opened. Giovanni stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway light, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair no longer perfect. He looked like a man who had made decisions that would echo through the rest of his life. "He is asleep down the hall," Giovanni said. "In the east wing. Safe. He is safe." She stared at him. Something in his face told her a truth she was not ready to hear. "You are his father," she said. Giovanni nodded once, a movement as small as a confession. "I found out 2 weeks ago. Social services located me. I have been arranging custody." He stepped into the room and sat in the chair across from the bed. "You are the volunteer who kept him alive until I could bring him home." Vivien's eyes filled with tears. The flood came without warning, her shoulders shaking, her breath breaking into pieces. "I thought I would never see him again," she whispered. Giovanni leaned forward. His hands hung between his knees. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to bend the air. "Tell me who hurt you." She hesitated, then the words came pouring out like water from a broken dam. "The fire on May 15th. Everything she owned turning to ash. Brennan appearing like a ghost, claiming she owed $150,000 because of the property damage, because of the negligence, because she was a woman alone with no one to protect her. The handwritten list that kept growing. The deadline that ended tonight. The $121 she had managed to save." As she spoke, Giovanni's face changed. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window. Outside, the rain fell in sheets, and lightning split the sky like a blade. A knock came at the door. Vinny entered, his expression cautious. "We ran the name," Vinny said. Harold Brennan works for Sophie Langford, the hotel chain. She has been trying to acquire your properties for 6 months. Lowball offers. When you refused, the pressure started. Giovanni's eyes went cold. Not angry. Cold. The kind of cold that came before something final. This was a setup, he said. He walked out of the room. Vivien heard him speaking to Vinny in the hallway, his voice low, a rapid-fire series of orders, and then silence. At 2:15 a.m., he returned with tea. The mug was white, simple, and he set it on the nightstand beside her. She stared at it like it was impossible. "Why would you help me?" she said. "I am nobody." Giovanni stood at the foot of the bed. The lamplight caught the line of his scar, running from the corner of his eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a violence she could not imagine. "You protected my son when I did not even know he existed," he said. "You are not nobody." She looked down at the tea, at her hands, at the blood dried on her skin. "I wrote him stories," she said quietly. "Taught him letters. Held him when he had nightmares about his mother leaving." Giovanni's voice cracked, just slightly, just enough that she heard it. "He talks about you constantly. The nice lady who reads." Vinny and Enzo, standing in the hallway outside the room, exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years. In that look was shock, understanding, and the recognition that everything had changed. The next morning at 8:48 a.m., Vivien came downstairs. The kitchen was enormous, all marble and stainless steel, and Micah was sitting at the table with Giovanni, eating scrambled eggs. When the boy saw her, he ran to her and wrapped his arms around her waist, and she held him like she was holding every good thing she had ever believed in. Later, at 10:38 a.m., Giovanni showed her the nursery upstairs. It was a room frozen in time. Pale yellow walls, barely faded. A wooden crib with rails that had never held a baby. A mobile hanging from the ceiling, dust on every animal, every shape. A rocking chair in the corner, angled toward the crib. The room smelled like flowers that had died a long time ago. 7 years, Giovanni said. His voice was like someone speaking from very far away. "I lost her 7 years ago. 3 days old. The mother did not want her. I tried to keep the room like this, like if I kept it perfect, somehow it would matter. Somehow she would still be here." Vivien touched his arm. His skin was warm beneath the fabric of his shirt. "You have a son now," she said. "A second chance." Giovanni looked at her hand on his arm, then covered it with his own. The gesture was so careful, so deliberate, like he was afraid that if he pressed too hard she would disappear. But what neither of them knew was that Sophie Langford had been watching Caruso's restaurant all night. She had seen Vivien stumble in, bleeding. She had seen Giovanni rise to protect her. And she was already setting her final trap, the one that would destroy them both, or so she believed. The bus station smelled like diesel fuel and human desperation. Vivien sat on a plastic bench under fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects, her parents' photograph clutched in one hand, $121 in crumpled bills in the other. The clock above the ticket counter read 1:48 a.m. The 2:30 bus to New York sat in the bay outside, its engine already idling, a gateway to another city, another beginning, another version of herself she might become if she simply walked away. Rain hammered the windows. Sheets of it, biblical and unforgiving, the kind of August downpour that made the whole world feel like it was drowning. Her phone sat dark beside her. She had deleted Giovanni's number before leaving the mansion. She had written him a letter and left it on the kitchen table where she knew he would find it. The words had taken her 3 hours to write because they were the hardest words she had ever arranged on a page. "Your daughter is waiting for you. The one who was lost. The one you have been grieving for 7 years. I cannot be the answer to that grief. I cannot let my presence destroy you. I know what happens to the people you love. I know how enemies work. They will use me as a weapon. They already are. Please let me go. Please build something real with Micah." He needs a father. He needs you. He does not need me. And you do not need the ruin I will bring to your door. She had not signed it. There was nothing to sign. Just the truth written in her own handwriting, the same hands that had served coffee in a diner, that had delivered groceries on a bicycle, that had held Micah through nightmares and braided his hair and read him stories about dragons and castles because he asked her to. The rain came harder. It pooled on the floor near the station doors. The ticket agent behind the counter checked his watch. Maybe 70 passengers waited in the terminal at this hour, each one carrying some version of escape, some version of need that had driven them to be awake when the rest of the world slept. She was just one more desperate person. One more nobody running toward nothing. But what she did not know was that Giovanni had driven through the rain for 23 minutes, his black Mercedes cutting through empty streets, water spraying up from the asphalt like the pavement itself was bleeding. Vinny had called him at 1:52 a.m. The letter had been found. The bus station had been identified through the photograph she had torn from Micah's hands, the one he kept asking for, asking where Vivi was going, asking when she would come back. The boy had woken screaming at midnight, and Giovanni had held him, and Micah had said, "She is leaving." "I know because people always leave." Those words had moved through Giovanni like a blade. The headlights cut through the rain at 2:13 a.m. The car pulled up directly outside the station entrance, water cascading off the windshield. Giovanni stepped out into the downpour without an umbrella, his suit absorbing the rain, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. He was 53 years old and he looked like a man who had just learned that saving a life was possible, that grief could be transformed into something that resembled hope. Vivien saw him and she stood. The letter was visible, rain-darkened at the edges, her words bleeding slightly into each other. He held it out and his voice came low and steady, cutting through the sound of the storm. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye." "I have to." Her voice was barely a whisper, shattered like thin glass. "They will destroy you because of me. My debt, my landlord, the fire, all of it. This is my problem. Not yours. You are mistaken." He stepped closer. The rain fell between them, thousands of tiny collisions, the smell of wet concrete and ozone heavy in the air. "They will try to destroy me regardless. That is what enemies do. They search for weakness. They hunt for leverage. But you walked into my restaurant bleeding and broken, and before you asked about yourself, you asked about my son. You stayed in his life when you had nothing. You gave him the only kindness he has ever known. 7 years I have been dead inside. 7 years. And you woke me up. I am just a delivery girl with $121 and a debt that is growing." She turned away. "I have nothing. I am nothing." Giovanni reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm despite the rain, his grip careful, deliberate, like he was afraid that holding too tightly would shatter her. "Listen to me. The people who told you that you were nothing were wrong. They were weak and they needed to believe in a world where some people did not matter. But you matter. You have always mattered. And my son, that boy upstairs who has never slept through a night because nightmares own him, he loves you. He calls you Vivi. He draws pictures of you. He asks me every morning if you are coming back." She looked at their joined hands. Rainwater ran down her wrist. "If I stay, they will come for you. All of them. Brennan, Sophie, everyone. The empire, the business, everything you have built. Let them come." His voice deepened, became something that sounded like thunder at a distance. "I have already decided. We are done hiding. We are done pretending that power is measured in how much blood you can shed or how many men you command. I am changing everything. Tonight, while you were writing that letter, my men were moving. By dawn, every piece of evidence that links Brennan and Sophie to this conspiracy will be in the hands of federal investigators. Every payment, every recorded conversation, every wire transfer. They wanted to destroy me. Instead, they will destroy themselves. Giovanni. Stay, he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, spoken like a prayer. Stay with me and with Micah. Stay in the nursery that has been waiting. Stay and help us learn how to be a family. Please. She could not move. The rain soaked through her clothes, and she was shaking, and she was crying, and the bus behind her honked its horn once, a sound like destiny calling, like the last chance to disappear, to vanish, to become someone else in a different city. She did not move toward the bus. Instead, she stepped forward into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, and the world narrowed down to the sound of rain and the feeling of being held, of being chosen, of mattering to someone in a way that went deeper than debt or damage or history. They stood there in the storm, and the bus pulled away at 2:35 a.m., and Vivien Morales did not get on it. At 5:27 a.m., as the sun began its grey approach to the horizon, federal agents arrived at Harold Brennan's apartment on the north side. They did not knock. They executed the warrant at the moment of sunrise, 6 men in suits with badges, moving through his small space like they owned it. They found the documents. They found the bank records showing Sophie Langford's wire transfers, $85,000, paid in installments, each one labeled with a simple code, Philadelphia problem. Brennan was still asleep. They woke him with flashlights and steel. Within 20 minutes, he was in handcuffs, his apartment being photographed, his computer being seized, his entire life being catalogued and dismantled. At 7:53 a.m., Sophie Langford stood at a podium outside the Langford Hotel. The press had been called. The cameras were rolling. She was dressed in a white pantsuit, her hair perfectly styled, her smile confident. She had called this press conference to expose Giovanni Caruso as a criminal who used his mafia connections to protect debtors, to hide his crimes, to destroy anyone who threatened his empire. She began to speak. The man known as Giovanni Caruso is a reporter stood up. Ms. Langford, what is your response to allegations that you paid Harold Brennan $85,000 to fabricate debt claims against Vivien Morales? The words hung in the air like a blade suspended at the moment before it falls. Sophie's face went white. She looked at the screens. She saw the recordings. She heard Brennan's voice on the footage, saying her name, describing the arrangement, detailing how she had orchestrated the entire scheme. She saw the bank records projected 20 feet tall, saw her own name and the amounts and the dates, saw it all unspooling like a curse that could not be taken back. That is not, I have never. She looked for her lawyers, but they were already walking away from the podium, their phones out, their expressions carefully neutral. Federal agents approached from the sides of the stage. One of them was a woman, tall and broad-shouldered, with a badge that caught the light. Sophie Langford, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit extortion, wire fraud, and filing false reports, the agent said, her voice steady and final. Sophie screamed. She actually screamed, a sound like an animal caught in a trap. You cannot do this. I am Sophie Langford. My family owns half of this city. I am. You are under arrest, the agent repeated. She placed the handcuffs on Sophie's wrists with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Sophie fought. She kicked. She screamed. She looked out at the cameras and the reporters and the crowd of people who were recording every moment, and she seemed to finally understand that screaming did not matter, that her name did not matter, that everything she had built was constructed on the same foundation as her lies. She was led away in handcuffs on live television at 7:43 a.m. By 8:15 a.m., Harold Brennan was also being arrested at a federal holding facility. He did not scream. He wept. He collapsed like a man whose skeleton had been removed, trembling like a cornered animal, his voice destroyed by sobs. It was her idea, he kept saying. She paid me. She said if I just applied pressure, made threats, the evidence would grow, and eventually he would fall, and we would both be rich. She said nobody would believe a delivery girl. She said Vivien was nobody. She said. The agents did not care what she had said. They booked him. Federal charges, conspiracy, extortion, fraud. Recommended sentence, 32 to 40 years, depending on cooperation, depending on testimony, depending on the extent of his crimes. The news spread like wildfire. By 9:33 a.m., 500,000 people had seen the footage. By noon, 2 million. By evening, every major news outlet in the country had run some version of the story. The Langford Hotel stock plummeted. Investors fled. Within 12 hours, the Langford family's empire began to collapse. Board members resigned. Partners terminated contracts. Banks called in debts. By August 20th, Sophie Langford's net worth had evaporated. By August 22nd, the hotel was being seized by the federal government to pay restitution. Giovanni watched the broadcasts in his office at Caruso's, Vivien beside him, her hand resting on his arm. When the final news alert came through, both villains sentenced to federal prison, both fortunes seized, both lives dismantled, she whispered, "It is over." Giovanni turned to face her fully. He took her hand and placed it against his chest, over his heart. She could feel it beating, solid and alive, a rhythm that had been missing for 7 years and was only now returning. "It is just beginning," he said. His voice was like thunder moving across distant mountains. "This is where we start again. All three of us." The rain outside had stopped. The August sun was breaking through the clouds, and the city glittered beneath it, and Vivien Morales, who had been nobody with $78, was finally, impossibly, becoming someone. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. 3 weeks had passed since the federal agents closed the doors on Harold Brennan and Sophie Langford. 3 weeks of silence in the Philadelphia underworld, the kind of silence that follows when the ground shifts and everyone realizes the landscape has changed forever. The rain had stopped. The city glittered beneath clearing skies, and Vivien Morales stood at the threshold of a life she had never dared imagine. September 10th arrived on a Tuesday morning. Giovanni's mansion rose above Rittenhouse Square like a monument to a world she had only glimpsed from the street below. The foyer alone was larger than every apartment she had ever lived in. But what struck her most was not the marble or the chandeliers. It was the sound of small feet running across hardwood floors, and Micah's voice calling her name before she had even removed her jacket. The boy exploded from the kitchen doorway, his arms full of drawings, his face flushed with the kind of joy that only children can sustain without exhaustion. He was 8 years old, with dark curling hair and eyes that had learned to smile again only in the last few weeks. He pressed the drawings into her hands without a single word of greeting. "I made these," he said, breathless. "Do you see? This one is the library. And this one is you reading. And this one is," he stopped, suddenly shy. "This one is me and you and him. But not sad like before. Happy like now." Vivien dropped to her knees. Her hands trembled as she held the papers, each one a child's careful rendering of a future he was still learning to believe in. The crayon colors bled past the lines, but every figure was unmistakable. She was in every drawing. So was he. So was Giovanni. "These are perfect," she whispered. Her voice cracked like old glass. "These are the most beautiful things I have ever seen." Micah threw his arms around her neck. She held him, and for the first time since losing her parents 9 years ago, she felt the sharp, sweet pressure of being needed by someone who would not leave. Giovanni stood in the doorway watching them. His dark suit was tailored to his frame like a second skin, his gold watch catching the morning light, but his face was something different entirely. Softness had begun to return to the hard lines around his eyes. 7 years. That was how long his daughter's nursery had remained untouched, frozen in time like a tomb. She had been stillborn at 23 weeks. Isabella. The name was carved into his heart in letters of ice. That evening at 8:11 p.m., he took Vivien's hand and led her up the staircase. Micah was asleep, tucked into his new room on the 3rd floor, his drawings taped carefully to the walls. The 2nd floor corridor opened onto a small door painted pale blue, with brass hinges and a silver handle shaped like a small bird in flight. Giovanni turned the handle slowly. The nursery was exactly as it had been for 7 years. A white crib, perfectly made, sheets that no child had ever lain upon. A mobile of felt clouds and stars hung frozen above it. Books lined the shelves, board books for an infant who would never need them, never learn to turn the pages, never sleep beneath these clouds. A small wooden rocker sat in the corner, its seat worn smooth by 7 years of a father's sleepless nights. "I want to change this room," Giovanni said. His voice was like thunder moving across distant mountains, measured and inevitable. "Not to erase her. Never to erase her. But to make space for the life we have now. For Micah? For you. For us." He turned to face Vivien fully. His eyes were dark with the weight of 7 years, but beneath that weight was something new, a kind of hope so fragile it might shatter if anyone spoke too loudly. "Will you help me?" he asked. She took his hand without hesitation. His palm was warm, scarred along the knuckles, heavy with the history of his life. She pressed her fingers into his grip and nodded. The next week became a strange kind of healing. They painted the nursery a soft grey-green, the color of new growth. Vivien and Giovanni worked together in the evenings after Micah slept, moving slowly, speaking in whispers, treating the room like a sacred space. They built shelves for children's books, chapter books that Micah was finally ready to read. They hung drawings on the walls, not the ones from the mobile, but new ones created by Micah's hand, stories he was learning to tell about a future that might include happiness. In one corner, they created a small memorial. A single shelf, candles in glass holders, a framed photograph of Isabella that Giovanni had kept hidden in his desk for 7 years. It showed her at birth, swaddled in a white blanket, impossibly small, impossibly perfect. Giovanni touched the glass with one finger when he thought Vivien wasn't watching. She pretended not to notice, the way people do when they witness something too private to acknowledge. On Micah's birthday, September 15th, he asked the question they had been waiting for. "Who is she?" His small voice echoed in the transformed nursery as he pointed at Isabella's photograph. Giovanni knelt until they were at eye level. He was a man who commanded rooms by standing still, who inspired fear by simply being present, and yet he knelt for an 8-year-old boy with the same reverence he might show God. "Your sister," he said. "Isabella is your sister. She lived for 3 days after she was born, a long time ago, before you came to us. She was very small, but she was very loved. And she is watching over us. Every single day." Micah considered this with the seriousness children bring to mysteries they cannot fully understand. After a moment, he nodded. Then he placed his hand on the photograph, pressing his palm against the glass where his father's hand had been. "Tell her I am okay," Micah said. "Tell her I am not scared anymore." Giovanni's eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were wet with tears he would not let fall, not yet, not while a child was watching. But they would fall later, in the dark, after Vivien had fallen asleep beside him in a bed that had been empty for 7 years. September 18th came soft and cool, the humidity breaking at last, autumn asserting itself over the city. The restaurant was closed to the public at 8:51 p.m. Candles flickered in the private booth where everything had begun, where Vivien had collapsed, bleeding, desperate, and Giovanni had seen not a girl, but a chance at redemption he did not deserve. She wore a simple dress, deep blue, the color of water. He wore his dark suit, but the shirt beneath was open at the collar, silk against his throat, a deliberate choice to be less guarded, to be visible to her. They sat across from each other in the candlelight, and the silence between them was not empty but full, the way silence becomes full when two people have learned each other's stories and found them worth knowing. "I was 19 when they died," Vivien said. Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking the truth might make it real again. "A car accident on the interstate, 3 hours away. They were coming to my college graduation. It was raining. They said a truck crossed the median. There was nothing left to bury. I held a funeral for 2 empty boxes." She looked at her hands, turning them over as if they belonged to someone else. The scars from the fire were fading, but they would never disappear completely. marks upon marks, a history written in her skin. Since that day, I have been alone, she continued. I thought that was just who I was. The girl with no one. The girl who had learned how to survive without being held by anyone who would not leave her. And then, she raised her eyes to meet his. Then you found me bleeding on your floor, and my entire life became different. Giovanni reached across the table. The candlelight caught his gold watch, the silver rings on his fingers, each one heavy with meaning, with years, with power. But when he took her hand, his touch was gentle, almost hesitant, as if she might break if he held her too tightly. You are not alone anymore, he said. His voice was soft now, intimate, meant only for her. I swear this to you. You will never be alone again. Vivien looked at their joined hands. His hand was large, scarred, a hand that had ordered violence and built empires and held a child through fever dreams. Her hand was small beside it, calloused from work, marked by hardship, but strong. Together they looked like a story being written in real time, a narrative of two lives becoming one. I never thought someone like you would see someone like me, she whispered. I never thought I would feel anything again, he replied. Not after 7 years of nothing. But you proved me wrong. You came into my life carrying nothing but yourself, and it was enough. It was everything. He stood and pulled her up with him. The restaurant was silent around them, the tables empty, the kitchen dark except for the single light above the booth. At 9:33 p.m., in the shadows and candlelight, Giovanni Caruso kissed Vivien Morales, not the dare that had started everything, but something real, something earned through blood and tears and the terrifying risk of letting another person matter. In the kitchen doorway, Vinny and Enzo stood frozen. Their boss did not kiss women. Their boss did not stand in empty restaurants holding someone's hand like she was made of something precious. Their boss did not smile. And yet, boss is smiling, Vinny whispered. Wonder cracked his voice like a boy's. Enzo did not speak. He had served Giovanni for 15 years, and in all that time, he had never witnessed this. A man capable of tenderness. A man willing to be broken open. When the kiss ended, Vivien rested her forehead against Giovanni's. He could feel her breathing, fast and light, as if she had been running toward something for a very long time and had finally stopped. There is something else, Giovanni said. Something I want to show you. 3 months later, on a December night when snow fell in thick, soft spirals across Philadelphia, Vivien Morales sat in the office of the university with a diploma in her hands. A Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Her name printed in calligraphy. Official. Real. Proof that the last 4 years of night shifts and study groups and surviving on crackers and coffee had meant something. There was a note folded in the diploma case, in Giovanni's handwriting. Your student loans, all $47,000, have been paid in full. I should have told you before. I apologize. But you have given me so much that costs nothing except your time and your kindness, and I wanted to give you something that might ease the weight you have carried alone. Welcome to your new life. You have earned it. G. She wept in the parking lot for 20 minutes, the snow collecting in her hair, her diploma pressed against her chest like it might escape if she did not hold it tightly enough. This was real. She was real. She was not nobody anymore. Micah called her mom now when he thought no one was listening, his voice tender and uncertain, as if he was still learning that it was safe to attach himself to someone with that permanence, that finality. Giovanni heard it one afternoon and his eyes shone with tears he did not bother to hide. That night he held both of them, a man made of stone learning again how to be made of something warmer. On December 20th, Giovanni took Vivien to the shelter where she had found Micah. It was raining, and the old brick building looked smaller somehow, diminished by memory. The director met them at the door, and Giovanni placed an envelope in her hands. Inside was a check for $500,000. The woman read it 3 times before she looked up at Giovanni, her face wet with tears. What is this for? She asked, though she already knew. One of these children saved my life, Giovanni said simply. He took Vivien's hand. I want to save the lives of hundreds more. Build a library. Hire full-time counselors. Give them what she gave my son, proof that they are not invisible, not to everyone, not forever. The director wept openly. This will change everything. Yes, Giovanni agreed. One hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. That Christmas Eve, the restaurant was lit with thousands of tiny lights. The private booth had been transformed into something like a stage for intimacy. Giovanni's men stood at a distance, Vinny and Enzo exchanging glances that spoke of awe and something like relief. Their boss had learned how to live again. Giovanni gave Vivien a small box wrapped in white silk. Inside were keys. She held them without understanding, turning them over in her palm like they might reveal their meaning if she looked long enough. The building where you lost everything, Giovanni said quietly. I bought it after the fire. I have renovated it completely. Every apartment is new. It is yours. All of it. In your name. A registry you can do with as you wish, a house for women in crisis, a shelter, a home for yourself. Whatever you decide. But you will never lose everything again. I will not allow it. Vivien sank to her knees. She had spent so many years braced against loss, expecting it, preparing for it, that this abundance, this permanence, this declaration that someone would stand between her and disaster, broke something open in her chest that had been sealed for almost a decade. She kissed him while tears ran down her face, and Micah, their Micah now, legally adopted, officially theirs, wrapped his arms around them both. Harold Brennan received 40 years. Sophie Langford received the same. Their empires dissolved like salt in water. Their names became cautionary tales whispered in boardrooms and back rooms, examples of what happens when you mistake power for invulnerability, when you believe that invisible people can remain invisible forever. But Vivien Morales, who once possessed only $78 and a photograph, now possessed everything that mattered. A son who called her mom with a voice full of certainty. A man who loved her not in spite of her losses but because she had survived them with grace intact. A future that glittered with possibility. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that second chances are real, that invisible people can become visible again, that love is the only empire worth building. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story about redemption and power and the kind of strength that has nothing to do with violence. Leave a comment below and tell me, what would you have done if you lost everything but found something better? I read every single one. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, joy, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. See you tomorrow.